In the golden age of 90s hip-hop, two rising stars from opposite ends of the culture clashed in the most intoxicating way. Sandra Peppa Denton of Salt and Peppa and Anthony Tretch, Chris of Naughty by Nature weren't just talented, they were lightning in a bottle. She was the firebrand voice of female empowerment, blasting stereotypes with each verse. He was the raw, charismatic poet from the streets of Newark, giving voice to an entire generation. When their worlds collided at industry events, the chemistry was electric. Two bold forces charging toward each other, unstoppable and unpredictable. Their relationship sparked like dynamite. At red carpet events, the two stood side by side, exuding power and purpose. To fans, they looked like the very definition of a power couple. Even Will Smith, years later, would remember watching them and thinking exactly that. But beneath the image of unity was a slow burning chaos that would one day erupt and leave emotional wreckage in its wake. They had everything that should have worked: fame, money, chemistry. But what they didn't have was stability. Their on again, off again love stretched over a decade, turbulent and passionate, but never peaceful. In 1998, they welcomed their daughter, Egypt, a new life caught in the middle of a storm neither parent seemed capable of calming. A year later, they made it official in a tattoo shop wedding in Kansas City. It should have been a celebration. Instead, it was a warning sign. Even the place they married, unconventional, ungrounded, reflected just how little tradition meant in their union. For Tretch, marrying someone inside the industry meant stepping into a relationship with built-in landmines. Both artists were constantly touring, recording, chasing individual dreams. That lifestyle wasn't just hard, it was incompatible. In his own words, it wasn't something he ever wanted long term, yet he did it anyway. How do you build a future together when your foundations were never aligned? The red flags had been waving from the start. Peppa was strong, fiercely independent, and used to calling her own shots. Tretch came from a world where control and dominance were seen as marks of strength. That power dynamic clashed like cymbals in every room they entered. What the public saw as edgy passion was, behind closed doors, a constant push and pull of who would bend first and who would break. While fans admired their love story from afar, those closest to them began to see the cracks. Peppa, once loud and proud, started to dim when Tretch was around. The woman who once strutted across stages without hesitation began to second-guess herself, often deferring to his opinions. That shift didn't go unnoticed. Friends whispered about how her presence changed, how she started asking for permission instead of speaking with conviction. At the heart of it all was a deep, painful imbalance. Peppa challenged gender norms on stage and in life, daring to wear pants with dresses, mixing feminine and masculine energy in a way that made her feel whole. But to Tretch, that wasn't style, it was confrontation. "She talking to me like a dude," he once said. The line might sound trivial, but it revealed the rift between how she expressed herself and how he perceived her doing so. Her strength wasn't inspiring to him, it was threatening. Their careers demanded time apart, months on tour, studio sessions in different cities. It all bred suspicion and jealousy. When they reunited, the tension didn't dissipate, it compounded. Each accusation, each night spent wondering who was doing what, pushed them further into a cycle neither could escape. The highs were euphoric, the lows were destructive. By the early 2000s, the emotional tug of war turned physical. It's in Peppa's 2010 memoir, Let's Talk About Pep, that the darkest truths were finally laid bare. She didn't hold back. "Trey and I were fighting. The fights we had were crazy," she wrote, and then came the sentence that froze readers in disbelief. "It always started with him pulling on my hair, I guess to get a good enough grip on me so he could smack me more easily. Can love still be called love when pain becomes its defining language?" The words hit hard, not just because of what they accused, but because of who they were about. This was Tretch, the voice behind OPP and Hip Hop Hooray, the man many admired for his raw honesty and lyrical fire. But Peppa's version of him was not the idol fans had placed on a pedestal. Her account of abuse wasn't vague, it was harrowing, detailed, and deeply personal. She didn't stop there. She claimed he once stood over her as she slept, demanding a divorce before snatching her ring and throwing it with full force. She wrote of being yanked out of bed, slammed into furniture, and choked while he screamed at her in a blind rage. These weren't lovers' quarrels. They were episodes of unchecked fury, bruising more than just her skin. Her spirit too bore the marks. Tretch, when confronted with these allegations, didn't launch a point-by-point rebuttal. Instead, he took aim at the publishing industry. He argued that when celebrities write books, especially with the help of ghostwriters and editors, the lines between truth and theatrics get blurry. You got to make sure everything is actual factual, he said, implying that what readers consumed may not have been entirely accurate. But there was no detailed denial, no accounting of events from his side, no clarity, only silence and deflection. Is silence a shield or a confession waiting in the shadows? Peppa's words cut deeper than any punch, because they weren't just about bruises or slammed doors. They were about betrayal by someone she loved. He never had to force it on me. He took it, she wrote, hinting at violations that went beyond the physical. Fans were stunned. Tretch responded not with empathy, but with anger, more focused on the book's editors than the pain etched into its pages. And then came the echo of that pain through their daughter, Egypt. As an adult reading her mother's memoir for the first time, she admitted, "I did not expect anything I read about her and my dad." Her voice trembled with disbelief. The safe, untouchable image of her father was shattered. Her world divided. How do you reconcile love for someone who may have caused someone else so much harm? By the time they divorced in 2001, both Peppa and Tretch were grappling with career shifts and personal chaos. But the war between them wasn't over. It was just changing shape. What started as bruises behind closed doors would now play out on camera through interviews, memoirs, and reality shows that blurred the line between healing and humiliation. Years passed, but the bitterness never fully faded. Peppa, while publicly thriving with TV deals and Salt and Peppa reunions, often found herself dragged back into the storm. Tretch claimed she twisted the truth for fame, accusing her of rewriting history, exploiting their pain. "She's lying," he barked in interviews, refusing to acknowledge any wrongdoing. His anger wasn't just personal, it felt performative, like a man still obsessed with control. Yet even in his defiance, Tretch's silence on the deeper allegations spoke volumes. Fans started asking, if he was innocent, why not deny it all outright? Why avoid the specifics? Meanwhile, Peppa stood her ground, rarely wavering. Her pain was no longer just hers. It was now part of a larger story about Black women, abuse, and survival. But even as she advocated for others, the trauma lingered. Fame didn't erase memory. The cameras captured her smile, but her book captured the scars. How do you heal when your truth is always under attack, especially by the one who broke you? When Tretch remarried in 2019 and invited Peppa to the wedding, it shocked everyone. Was it maturity or PR? Egypt stood between them, a living symbol of their past and the fragile bridge between them. The wedding was civil, but far from healing. Even years later, Egypt would reflect on the mess she inherited. "I learned my mother was in pain, but also that my father was someone I didn't fully know." The emotional tug of war tore at her between loyalty and truth, love and disappointment. And fans could relate. Many saw their own broken families mirrored in the wreckage of Peppa and Tretch's past. Today, their legacy isn't just about 90s hits or reality shows. It's about what gets passed down. The pain, the silence, the generational hurt. Peppa turned her trauma into a voice. Tretch, many argue, turned his into denial. Can peace ever exist when the truth still divides you? Their story isn't wrapped in a neat ending. It's raw, unfinished, and forever shaped by wounds that time alone can't heal. And maybe that's the hardest part. Some scars aren't meant to fade. They're meant to be remembered.